Hello and welcome to Careers Talks Live with Max from the Young Project, and today we are lucky enough to have Kayleigh Stevenson from the Royal Air Force with us today. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
No worries at all, no worries at all. I guess it's just kind of starting off with what is your job title and what does your role entail?
So I joined the Royal Air Force about 15 years ago as a physical training instructor. It entails you get an apprenticeship and you learn all about the body, anatomy, physiology, nutrition, and we do a lot of fitness testing in the Royal Air Force. So our main aim really is to keep people fit and healthy throughout their career.
Awesome. I think it's worth covering at this stage, like the variety of roles that are within the Air Force, because again, I think with young people and maybe when you're kind of, before you get into deciding what career that you want to go into, like you kind of think of the Air Force of just flying planes, whereas there's a lot more kind of aspects to it and there's so much that you can do within that. So I don't know if you want to kind of cover the sort of roles that you can do in the RAF?
Definitely, and there's such a wide spectrum of different career pathways. There's over 50 different roles in the Royal Air Force, so it's difficult to choose between. And there's probably some roles you didn't even think of, such as photography, musicians, and you may have not even thought of my one, physical training instructor. Over 50 different roles, but also within your trade. So even though I joined up as a physical training instructor, you can then specialise in certain areas. So for instance, for my trade, you can specialise in 3 different areas. So exercise therapy, which is the route I took. You can specialise in parachute jump instructing, so teaching people how to jump out of an aircraft. And have you ever seen the RAF Falcons as well?
Yeah, I think I have, yeah.
Aircraft with sort of colours on their feet. They make big displays, usually and big events as well. And we've also got adventure training instructors. So we provide adventurous activities for the Royal Air Force, including things like mountain biking, kayaking, climbing, skiing, and things like that. So there's lots of different areas you can specialise in my role as well.
And for the guys in the call, how many of those different career pathways did you know that existed in the Air Force? Like, were you under the same impression that I was, or were you aware of that complete range of careers? And while those guys are answering that, I don't know if you want to cover like more specifically like what your kind of job actually entails, like day to day.
So before joining up, really, I just loved playing sport. So for me, it was research based. I wasn't initially aware. I've got no family history in the military or friends that joined the military. So for me, it was research based. I really wanted to continue playing sport and learn about the body and anatomy and different ways that I could fitness train as well. And the Royal Air Force was a way for me to carry on educating myself, but also play the sports that I love. The wonderful thing is that when you do a career in the Royal Air Force, whichever one it might be, you still get time off of work. So in your work's time to play sport.
Oh, cool.
So I joined the RAF swim team. And I've also played lots of different things for them. I've been rock climbing in the rock climbing teams. I've done athletics with them. And that's all in work's time as well. And I've been all over the world swimming for the Royal Air Force too. So.
Wow, that's super cool.
Yeah,
Again, go on, sorry.
No, so I was just going to say, and then I'll go into more of my sort of day-to-day roles and things like that.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, so with the physical training side of things, so I'll sort of break it down into the different areas that I've worked in. Mm-hmm. So initially when I joined up as a physical training instructor, we did a couple of years of our basic training. So your first 9 weeks, 10 weeks is usually doing your basic military skills. So you learn a little bit about the Royal Air Force, you learn about the history, you learn how to iron your uniform, you learn about saluting, you learn about your green skills. So for instance, if you have to camp out, you learn how to use a weapon safely. And then once you've done those 9 weeks, they have a big pass out parade where you can invite your parents and show them what you've been doing over the last 9 weeks. And then you go into your phase 2, which is your training. And that's where you might do an apprenticeship. I did an NVQ. So you get civilian qualifications, which are transferable, which is great. And I did that at RAF Cosford.
Okay.
And I did that for 37 weeks, where I also did some adventure training. So I went to Wales and we did climbing, kayaking, potholing, abseiling, loads of fun things. And so then after that, during my phase 2, is I learned all different sports. So I played sports, every single one, learning the rules, how they work, hockey, badminton, football. We did our national lifeguarding qualification. We did things like spinning, anything really that could keep members of our community fit and healthy, really. And then after we'd done the phase 2 training in IMVQ, we went to our third placement, which is into the working environment.
Mm-hmm.
But you've also got some further continued development. So you have to tick a few things in the box, for instance, like they have to see you teaching your lessons correctly. So it's just continuous training really for the next year. And you go into the gym environment where you might do gym plans, gym programming, you look after the maintenance, the fire safety, and the gymnasiums. So in the Royal Air Force, the physical training instructors also look after the gym facilities. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit like your local leisure centre. So on a unit, you might have 2,000 to 3,000 people, and some of the units even go up to 8,000 people.
Wow.
So they have gym facilities, swimming pools, athletics tracks, hockey pitches, you name it, most of them have them. And so we would look after all those facilities as well and provide a service to those guys as well.
Wow, that is unreal. I didn't realise it was quite on that scale.
Yeah. And then I went into my specialisation. And that's where I become an exercise rehabilitation therapist, and that's joint service. So the Army and the Navy also do that training as well, so we can provide a more in-depth, and we work alongside physios to provide treatment plans. Mm-hmm. And so I did 6 months at Headley Court, which is the Defence Medical Rehabilitation Centre, where they do, any injured personnel can go and they'll do full-time course with specialists, so physios, doctors, orthotics, anything that they might need in one area, and they can designate their time to get back to fit and healthy, really. And so I did all my training there, where I learned all sorts of different stuff, clinical anatomy, kinesiology, and exercise progressions, all evidence-based. And then once we passed out of there, then obviously we had a celebration, and then we moved into our work career as a exercise therapist.
Wow. So like, I have seen your question, Connie, by the way, but I'll come to that in a minute. So how long did the process take from when you started up until when you had to pick that specialisation? And like, what were the options as well for the specialisation?
Yeah. Okay. So it was 9 weeks initial, and then I did, I think it might be 10 weeks now with some of the adventure training. And then I did my phase 2, whereas that's where you specialise in what trade you're doing. So then I did about 37 weeks. I think that's reduced now for physical training instructors. So you need to look into that a little bit more. So that was overall probably about a year and a half. And then I went into the job role. Mm-hmm. And I was in that job role for then about 2 to 3 years. I did a specialist vetting to see whether I was right for the exercise therapy role. And that's when I went to do my third course, my specialisation.
Oh, okay. Perfect. So we've got a bit of dialogue in the chat that says, I know very little about the roles in the forces. I've never thought about it before. And then she's asked a question saying, if there was ever a war, would you just be doing military work rather than being a PT instructor?
Potentially. There may be other tasks that might be more important. But we're also kind of used as quite a lot of welfare as well. So when people aren't doing their main role in a wartime situation, we may provide them gym facilities, places where they can recuperate. As an exercise therapist, obviously you may be used for acute injuries such as spraining ankles, or wrists or arms or things like that as well, to tape them, strap them and make them secure. And any niggles that people might have, again, you might be asked then to treat them. But other than that, so for instance, if we go out on operations at present, in peacetime, we would maintain gym facilities so that it keeps morale high, really.
Perfect. So, I mean, I think we may have already covered it before because you mentioned about your MVQ, but what qualifications do you have and do you need to get into your kind of role or into the forces?
Okay, that's a good question. So it really varies to what trade you want to join up as. So you can join with no qualifications at 16 with your parents' consent, or at 18 by yourself. But for each trade, the qualifications are very different. So either no qualifications for things like catering and force protection, or a few more qualifications, say if you want to be an engineer, so GCSEs, A levels. If you want to become an officer, so sort of managerial level, they usually look at degree level.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Very clear breakdown there. So do you have any kind of advice or tips on how to maximize your chances of getting into this kind of role?
Yes, I'll say do research. Our website is fantastic, and there's an online chat that you can do there as well. We also have Armed Forces Careers offices in most of the city centres, or you can look online of where they're based, and you can go in and chat to someone, or chat to someone on the phone as well, and really get in-depth information about potential, what your trade might involve, where you might go as your trade, and what you would be doing in a general job role as well. And a little bit of history of the Royal Air Force always helps as well. If you're looking at officer level, the vetting is slightly more rigid. So you would need to look at current affairs and a little bit more in depth and do research about the Royal Air Force as well.
Perfect. And I think I would also kind of add on to that, that because there is such a variety of roles in the Air Force, if you are kind of sat here watching or thinking that you're not sure what you want to do in the future, then definitely kind of check out all of the roles. Don't limit yourself to just saying, I'm going to do this. Like, have a read between all of the different roles, because aren't there like over 50 different roles?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely have an explore, because there's, if you're not sure, then you're more likely to find something if you kind of broaden what your thought process is and kind of look at a bit of everything. The Air Force is not just doing one certain thing, like, as well, I wouldn't imagine that many people are aware that there is that variety in there. So, I mean, yeah, definitely completely agree with you there. And then we may have covered this already, but like, I'm interested kind of now, I guess, what does a typical day look like for you? Like, what sort of things would you do kind of every single day?
Yeah, so really it can change every 2 days, every 2 weeks, every 2 months. I don't think any of my time in the Royal Air Force has been the same. The wonderful thing is that it's ever changing. And I've also done a couple of other roles on top of my exercise therapy as well. I've been an instructor, so I've got some teaching qualifications where I've been able to teach sort of some of the basic training to people that are just joining up. But also I'm now doing community engagement as well. So it's always different, always ever changing. And again, I think it depends on which role that you're choosing to whether you could potentially be on shift work, you know, whether you're doing driving hours. It's so variable, really. So yeah, days are always different.
There's never an easy answer to that question, I don't think.
I think so, no. But generally, I would probably say that being a physical training instructor, you would generally work from 8 till 5, very normal job hours. And you can either live on camp or live in your own house. We get lots of questions about, do you have to stay on camp? Really a normal working environment, and any extra hours that you do, you do get them back in lieu. So you may work extra hours on one day, but you'd get them back on another day of your choice.
And again, I'll just kind of explain what Lou means, because again, when you're like a young person or when you're not in the working world, I didn't know what Lou meant when I first started. People started saying Lou to me. I was like, what do you mean? Like,
yeah, apologies.
But yeah, Lou basically means it's any extra hours that you work as part of your job, you can take off that number of hours at another point, which is agreed with like your manager or whatever. So say you work at an event that is above and beyond your regular working hours, say the event lasts 2 hours, you would then get those 2 hours in lieu that you could take at another point where you kind of like take 2 hours off your day so that you're kind of still working your agreed hours. So that's basically what Lou is. And we have another question. As a PT instructor, do you travel the world?
I have done. I've travelled in lots of different ways. So for instance, when you come out of your training, which could be in different parts of the UK, you'll then get posted to a certain area. And that might be between 3 and 5 years. You can put your preferences down. So for instance, I've been to Wales. So I've been posted to Wales. I've been posted to RAF Wittering. I've been posted to Headley Court in London. So it can be, obviously you can move around in those situations. And we also have overseas postings as well. So you can get posted to Germany, Washington, California, different places like that as well, depending on your trade. You can also travel in the form of sport, as I mentioned before. So for instance, if you're part of a team, so with swimming, I used to train every year for a week in Lanzarote in a nice outdoor pool.
Very nice.
In my work's time, and I would just pay a small contribution to that, so maybe £50 to £100, and that would all be paid for. And then I would travel for those competitions as well. So I've been to the US, to Germany, to play their forces as well. So that's one way I've travelled with sport. And another way that you can travel as well is through adventure training and force development. So adventure training being things like skiing. So I've been skiing probably about 5 times with the Royal Air Force. Again, a really small personal contribution, but I've been to Austria, Sweden, France, Norway, lots of different places. I've been climbing in Calpe. I've been sailing around New Zealand for 3 weeks, and then force development as well. So for instance, we try and continually educate ourselves as well and develop ourselves as a team. So quite often you can go to places like Normandy and learn more about the World War and lots of different areas like that as well. So, and you know, we've been to the Churchill War Rooms and lots of different other places as well.
Wow, sounds amazing. Very, very, very good opportunity there. So what would you say was like the biggest factor that's helped you in kind of getting to where you are today in your career journey?
I think research initially, so researching what I wanted to do and having that drive and confidence really to get to the position that I wanted to really. I think you need an element of drive, want, and just the confidence to go and try and make sure, you know, that you do what you want to do. Because I think if you don't have a go at it, you're not ever going to know whether you can do it or not. So.
Absolutely. And I guess the want comes from like looking around and finding the thing that you are interested in and following that passion, and then the confidence comes from believing that you can do it and that you're able to follow your dream and find that passion and all the rest of it. So then on the other foot of that, on the other side, what would you say was your biggest obstacle in getting to where you are, and like how did you overcome that? I know that's quite a difficult question, and some people are like, oh well, you know, I've not had any huge struggles and stuff, and maybe you haven't, but you know, I think it's interesting to kind of see both sides of it.
Yeah, an obstacle. No, that is a very challenging question. I think it's just really when I was younger, it was having the confidence to move away from my family, overcoming that, not knowing what was going to happen. And then once you've overcome those anxieties and you use them in a positive way and sort of positive energy towards excitement rather than anxiety, I think you overcome that and think, well, think of all the fun things that you're going to be doing and how much you're going to grow as a person as well.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I think that's great. So if you kind of had to change anything, if you had to do anything again, what would you change, if anything?
What would I change? Oh, so when I had to choose my specialisation, I think that's always a tricky one because there's so many positives in some of them. For instance, adventure training is quite exciting because you get to go skiing quite a lot. You get to take people surfing and lots of different things. So that was quite exciting. Then you've got the other side of it where you have to walk in the winter. And so there's always pros and cons to either of them. And the parachute jump instructing as well. It was always I was always trying to figure out whether, the excitement of that would be quite interesting as well. So because there's so much to choose from, sometimes it's a bit bewildering. To find the right path for you. Yes, yeah. And in the military, it's very difficult to change trades or to change over into different streams once you've specialised as well.
Oh, wow. I think the parachute one definitely sounds exciting, although not for the faint-hearted.
Yeah, but again, that's another opportunity. So whatever trade you are, you can actually go and do that. If you wanted to learn how to free fall and stuff like that with the right amount of hours and stuff, you can go and do that too.
Wow. So like kind of another angle, how long does it take to like finish your specialization? I know obviously you're always learning and you never kind of fully make it or specialize or whatever, but how long does it take to go from like choosing your specialization to being like kind of fully committed into that, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So for each course it's different. So for the exercise therapy, it was 6 months. And then we have to do 24 hours continued professional development. So more courses each year to sort of develop our knowledge, as well as keeping up to date with evidence-based research as well. So you're constantly reading the new papers and new research that was available to you as well. But as an exercise therapist, you don't work alone either. So you work in a multidisciplinary team. So we'd quite often work alongside doctors, physios, as well, to help us make the right choices for our patients as well.
Perfect. And then I've only got one other question for you, unless anyone else has got some questions. So what would you say is like the most important lesson that you've learned so far in your career?
Really to enjoy what you're doing. I think if you want something a little bit different, the military, so both the Army, Navy and Royal Air Force are really worth looking into. Every day is different, and really just to use the opportunities that are available to you as well, to give you great life experiences as well. It's not all about work.
Absolutely. Yeah, so if anyone else has got questions, then by all means kind of ask them. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that I've not asked or not covered?
No, I don't think so. I think some of the options in the Royal Air Force to train whilst you're getting paid are quite nice as well. And there's also lots of bursaries available as well if you're looking at going to university too. Or there's always constant ways to increase your learning capacity in the Royal Air Force as well. So we have learning development centres where you can do courses that are paid for by the Royal Air Force, so you can continually develop as well. And if you've been in the Royal Air Force for a certain amount of time, you can also get money towards a degree if you wanted to go further in your educational studies as well.
Wow, awesome. That sounds really good.
Things that people might not know about.
Absolutely. I was going to say, is there any, because what I'll do is I'll leave like a link to some more information in the video description. I can't really do that at the moment because I don't. But yeah, if there's like a particular link or something where people can find more info, I'm sure I'll be able to get that off you. And I'll put that in the description so people can find out more about it and get everything that they need to know. The website's probably a good way to start, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So I want to thank you very much, Kayleigh, for your time and for volunteering to be part of this. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you. I've very much enjoyed it.
I'm glad you have. So thank you very much for watching as well. And I hope this was useful. Make sure you check out the links in the description for more information about the RAF. You can also find all of our social information down there. So you can find out more about when we do things like this for future reference. And yeah, hopefully we will see you in the next one.